Hello, welcome back to my studio. I'm just starting a new piece of wood carving, so I thought I'd share what I'm doing. Before we do that, I'll share a couple of other ones that I've already been working on. So I've shown this one before. This skull was one of the earliest wood carvings I did. I was really pleased with it. I'm in the process of putting varnish on it to buff it up a bit and to try and bring out some of this colour and definition, but I really like that one. So much so I decided to try and repeat, to use this skull motif again, but in a slightly different form. And so you may remember, if you watched my last video, I was showing a big slab of a door that I'd retrieved from a skip over the road. And was musing on what I would do with it. Well, like that particular piece I've cut into 4, and this is the first thing I've done on it. Now, if you look at this, that's a really thick piece of wood, so I'm still a little bit unsure as to whether this is really the best use of this wood, given how sturdy it is, but this is what I've done. So another skull here with a slightly different motif, and it's got my little signature motif in the middle. This wood's quite nice to work with because it's got a really thin veneer on the top, and when you dig below that you get to this wood here, which I think is pine, and it's quite light and makes it really easy to see where you're cutting. But I've still got the white from the paint that you can see on this edge. It's still pretty well embedded in the grain. And I'm thinking that's probably all right, but I've sanded it down quite a lot and there's quite a lot of staining here, and I'm just trying to decide what to do with that, whether just to leave it, whether to try and sand it back a bit more. But overall I'm really pleased with that, even if it does weigh a ton. So I'm not sure what you would do with this. Well, you put it on the wall, I guess, but it's going to need some really sturdy hangers. But yeah, I'm quite pleased with that. Still got to work out the edges, which are not straight. And a few other bits, but that I think is largely done. So I moved on to the next piece, which is what you see in front of you, in front of me. So this lady, this 1920s lady, was part of a design I did for an art exhibition, which was last September, which was held in the cinema next door to me, which is a 1920s Art Deco cinema that's been derelict. It's called the Octorada Picture House, and we held an art exhibition in there with 30 artists. Me and my friend Sharon organised it, and it was really successful. I had lots of people through the door, and I designed this for the flyers and the posters and stuff, and it's just from a picture of a 1920s flapper lady that I found. I'm not sure who it is. I'm pretty sure it's not Louise Brooks, who's the usual flapper that you see, 1920s bob haircut, this type of look. So I'm not sure who it is, but I really like the image, and I've painted pictures of it as well. But I think I suddenly realised it really lends itself to this approach of wood carving. So I'm going to have a go at doing, probably, I guess, is my biggest piece yet. Certainly my longest piece, and I'm going to see how that goes. Now this is a piece of, again, I think it's pine. This was a shelf in my last house that got taken down, so I'm just using the wood. It's not the nicest piece of wood, but I'm getting better at making these things look nice. So what I'm going to do while I'm here is to transfer this image onto this piece of wood. I've got some carbon paper underneath, and I'm just going to move that down and down and down, and just trace over the top of this image. I mean, I literally just printed this out on my normal home printer. This is just A4 printer paper, and then I've sellotaped it together. Now I could have tried to transfer this freehand, but it's finicky and takes a long time, and I would have ended up probably using a grid or similar as a method for sort of scaling up the image, and it takes a lot longer, and it's quite dreary, it's quite boring, and as I've said before, I do this because I like doing it, But the bit I like doing is, you know, carving out the picture. And so I don't want to spend hours trying to transfer this image to the board by hand, because it's just no fun, right? I'd much rather be doing the fun bit. So, you know, if you think this is cheating, well, good for you. I don't care, right? This is how I tend to do things. It's the most efficient way of doing it and gets me to the fun stuff much more quickly. It's highly unlikely that I'll just leave it as a picture of this lady. I'm almost certainly going to start putting some of my own symbology on it, and sort of playing around with it a bit, because that's what I like to do. I'm a big fan of 1920s Art Deco and a bit earlier Art Nouveau style and art and iconography, Great Gatsby, that type of thing, and so it tends to turn up quite a lot in my work, and it does lend itself to this type of thing, especially Art Deco with its stark, angular, geometric shapes, and you know, the photos of the people there were either by design or necessity quite high contrast, and as a result it makes them, see, look, I'm already doing something silly. I'm drawing all the way down here when the carbon paper only comes halfway down, so I'm going to go back up here and try and get some of this pattern. If this is what happens when I talk to you rather than actually paying attention to what I'm doing. Yeah, but 1920s is a good place, and I love these old, grainy, stark, you know, high contrast black and white photos of women who had to wear sort of really striking makeup so that they could, you know, they would show up properly and look as striking as possible in the black and white photos. And it's just such an amazing look, and it really lends itself to stuff like this. And so the more I sort of think about it in terms of, you know, my progression as an artist, this whole woodcut thing, whatever we're calling it, seems like a pretty natural and obvious progression to me, even if I don't quite remember why I took the decision to start doing it. I was always going to end up doing something with wood, I think, because I love wood. I love the smells, I love the way it feels, I love the grain, I love that every piece of wood is different and had its own fingerprint. And my dad was a furniture restorer when I was a kid, and you know, I love the smell of the chemicals and the stains and the varnishes, and you know, I love being in my dad's garage and in his workshop watching him do this stuff, even if I never got into it myself at the time. So it's not surprising to me that I find myself working with wood. How long this goes on is anyone's guess, but it's a fun diversion, and as much being driven by necessity and the fact that I can't afford to buy any new canvases, whereas I can find bits of wood for free. I found another log earlier on. Since the wind is with the storm over the last couple of days, 100-mile-an-hour winds, and I've just been for a walk, and you know, lots of trees down around the local area. There's just lots of trees in the local area, and so there's lots of logs everywhere. I managed to retrieve one. Not a particularly big one because I couldn't carry it very far. I just had to put it in the boot of the car. But there's a bunch of trees down in public places that fell over roads and have just largely been chopped up to get them out of the road and left there. And so I might go and see if there's any nice bits of log that I can retrieve and use for something more useful, but I'll have to let them dry out a bit, so I probably won't be able to do anything until the summer. But I find I've got my eyes constantly open for scraps of wood or similar, you know, just lying around the place in skips, and you'd be surprised that once you keep your eyes open, just, you know, how often you just stumble across stuff that's just been dumped, either because people dumped it or they haven't got around to taking it to the dump yet. And can be happily taken and repurposed. I'm going to move my carbon paper down a bit. Oh no, I'm missing a bit in the middle here. The trick is to not let the image move around too much. It's a bit harder with an image this big, but anyway, I'm surrounded by wood, and that pleases me. I love the idea of not having to spend lots of money on this stuff. As much as I like rooting around art and craft shops and buying equipment, I always feel a little bit guilty, and so it's quite nice to just be able to get something that's just there and would otherwise not be getting used or thrown away. This idea of getting something from nothing is really compelling to me. In nature, you plant a seed, and if it germinates and it grows into a tree, it's not something from nothing per se, because that tree needed nutrients from the ground and water and sunlight. But ultimately, trees and plants are just machines for transforming sun energy into matter, right? And that's as close as close as getting something from nothing as you can get. And I find that process absolutely fascinating. And as we come into spring, that process is going to be on show everywhere. And I've always really loved that idea, and it sort of comes out in other stuff that I do, like programming and so on. Again, it's not that there was nothing that went into it, because there's always effort and electricity, and I have to eat and so on, so I have to be fueled. It's just a case of, well, I didn't have to go out and buy something, I didn't have to invest lots of money in some software or equipment or something new, and there's that constant compulsion in modern capitalist society to constantly buy new things, to update, to just consume. So this whole illusion of infinite growth can maintain itself, and rich people can get richer. And it feels like an act of defiance and an act of transgression to create something where there was nothing before, to take something that was considered to have no worth and make it into something that has some worth. And that's anathema to hardcore capitalists. It's just the opposite of what they want. It's not helpful to them at all. They don't want us reusing things, they don't want us fixing things, they don't want us learning how to make things ourselves. They want us to take their nice packaged stuff that costs them almost nothing to make, pay them a huge premium for it, and then have it, wear out, run out, not provide the right level of nutrition, whatever, that's going to stimulate us to need or want to get more. So you have built-in obsolescence with Apple hardware, and just a general erosion of the services that we use, like the social media platforms, and just the general, what Cory Doctorow calls the enshittification of the internet. Well, it's everywhere, and we're expected to just plump for cheap, low quality, highly profitable materials, goods and things that, didn't, what am I doing? I'm drawing about the artistry was so far up the value chain that the designer or the engineer, is so far removed from the final product that no human hands have really had any real influence on these things, and they're just cheap and disposable, and people treat them so. And there's obviously the environmental impact. If you've ever tried doing something like cheese making, because I've had every hobby, and also bread, to a slightly lesser extent bread making, which I do, and I've got sourdough and stuff, not because I'm a bloody hipster, because I like bread. Another thing my dad did when we were kids, he was a baker, and we used to go to the bakery and watch him bake bread and cakes and stuff. So I love those smells and sights and sounds. They remind me of my dad. Anyway, the point being is that you would have thought, well, let's make my own cheese, let's make my own bread. It may or may not be enjoyable, but it will be cheaper. But you realise really quickly that it isn't. we don't have those economies of scale, and therefore, we can't really realise any value from making our own bread or cheese. And cheese is particularly difficult. It's amazingly hard to make, and takes a really long time and a lot of milk. And it's just not worth doing unless you really want to take that up as a hobby, unless you really want to make cheese, right? And most people don't. So it's really hard to sort of try and take responsibility for your own existence, and to try and lessen your impact on the world, and to reduce the amount of wastage that happens. They've made it hard to impossible to either do it, or so ridiculously counterproductive that only hardcore and hobbyist people would do these things. And I think that's sad. I think we've all lost a lot because of it. But I'm taking some of this back, right? I do make my own bread regularly, and my family love it. And I do repurpose bits of old wood, and I do create things by hand. And I don't think these things are worth anything like what they used to be, simply because there are so many other options for people to go and get something that looks handmade, to go and get an AI generated image, or a print from IKEA, and it costs them 10 or 20, 30 quid, and that costs a fraction of that to make. And because for an artist or an artisan to create these things, it costs them a lot more. They look a lot more expensive, and people are less likely to buy it, and to want to commit the funds to invest in something beautiful that's been made by a real human who they can meet and lives in the real world and needs to eat and stuff. And that's exactly what these big corporations want. They don't want free enterprise. They don't want people doing things and selling it and supporting the arts community, because it's counterproductive to their goals as businesses. And so it is when making things, creating things, reusing things, recycling, upcycling. It's an act of rebellion. It's an act of transgression, and it's an act that goes directly against the interests of the incumbent governments, particularly the new government in the USA. And it's exactly what they don't want you that you're doing. They don't want you to be doing things independently. They don't want you to be able to support yourself. They don't want you to be able to think for yourself. They want you to be compliant citizens. And so, yes, I'm really attaching lofty ideals to the act of carving some stuff out of wood, and I don't make much, if any, money out of this, and I do it mainly for my own pleasure. I can't claim to be the next Che Guevara, but I am doing other things to try and resist the march towards fascism that we see in the USA, but probably in the UK when it comes down to it. I'm doing other things, and maybe none of it's worth it. Maybe none of it's making any difference, but I'm doing it. And if I'm doing anything like that, I might as well be doing something that I enjoy, and I enjoy doing this. And will it make a difference? I don't know. Will ranting on in a video to whoever's watching really have any effect? I doubt it, but here I am anyway. And if you're watching this, then hope you enjoyed my rant. I really honestly didn't plan to have that rant. I just planned to draw on this and record it and just say what was on my mind. And it turns out what's on my mind is transgression and rebellion. So my trans friends out there, anyone who is in a marginalised group that is being used as a kicking post for fascists, oligarchs, and general unpleasant humans, you have my support and my unwavering support. You don't deserve this. You're being demonised for no reason. Right, political views aside, that's what we have, right? If you don't think political views should have any place in a video on YouTube about crafts, then you haven't understood who I am as a person at all. And go and listen to my podcast, Art Against Mental Politics, which is a few episodes ago, is on my YouTube feed. I believe that art, craft and creation is inherently political, which is why I'm not going to be backwards in coming forward with my political view, especially given that's what some really, really, really bad people want. So anyway, I will start hacking away at this and see where it goes, and I'll see you soon, hopefully.